Today, the topic that I chose after much praying and thinking about was spiritual leadership. You know, I think that for almost 3 years now, I've talked about being the spiritual head of the family, and I never explained how to do that. So I thought, I brought this up last time that we got together, so it really hit me that, to borrow a phrase from one of my professors, I should define my terms. And so that's what I'm going to do today. But I'd like to start off by saying that one of the things that occurred to me, and maybe it's just because we've had a recent loss in our parish of a young father and a young husband, is that we're all going to die. And Scripture says that we know not the day nor the hour. You know, I don't know when the end of times is going to come, you know, when Christ is going to return in glory. But I do know one thing. I do know that at some point I'm going to die and I'm going to have my encounter with Christ. And the question is, will you be ready for that? I remember a few years ago where I was, when I was at the height of my weight, I was struggling with sleep apnea, and I was afraid I was going to die in my sleep. And I had, it hit me in a powerful way that I could die. And I wasn't entirely sure that if I died, I was going to make it to heaven. And talk about getting scared straight. Now, it doesn't mean I'm perfect now, but it does mean that it gave me, it made me ponder and think about the fact that every day we're involved in a spiritual battle against the principalities of evil. And the spoils of the war are the souls of our family. That's what's at stake. How many? I would venture to guess that those of you that are fathers and husbands, that if I went around and asked you, would you be willing to lay down your life for your family if they were physically threatened, every one of you would say, yes. Whether you had a weapon or not, you would do whatever you needed to do to protect your family. But are you ready to defend your family spiritually? And are you doing that? And that's what today's talk is all about. Because, gentlemen, we are facing a crisis of leadership. Not just in our country, but specifically in our church. And I'm talking about male leadership. I don't know where this notion came around that being faithful and being religious was a woman's thing. We're called to be the spiritual leaders of the family. And I want to drive this home by, I don't normally do this, but I want to show you how important it is that the father be the spiritual head of the family. So I'm going to read a statistic to you. It's a series of statistics. And then I'm going to call on you, Michael, because you have a statistic I'd like you to share with everybody. All right, so here's the deal. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 different statistics. All right, so if a father does not go to church, no matter how faithful his wife's devotion, only 1 child in 50 will become a regular worshiper. 1 in 50, 2%. Doesn't matter how faithful the mom is. If dad doesn't go to church, 2% will keep the faith. If the father goes to church regularly, regardless of the practice of the mom, between 2/3 and 3/4 of the children will become churchgoers. 67 to 75% if dad practices the faith. A non-practicing mother with a regular father will see a minimum of 2/3 of their children ending up going to church. On the flip side, a non-practicing father with a very faithful mother will see 2/3 of their children never darken the church door. And if the wife, if both of them, then it goes up above 80%. Those are staggering numbers.
Is that just for Catholics, or is that just faith in general? I mean, is
Faith
that
in general.
across the board?
Yeah.
So,
It was a 2000 study that was done. And it's the source was from the book that you've heard me talk about before, called Christian Fatherhood by Stephen Wood. It's the basis or the foundation for the original development of this organization, St. Joseph Covenant Keepers.
If that was 2000, it's probably worse now.
And Michael shared another statistic with us on Wednesday night when we were up here for RCIA training. You want to share that stat?
Oh, statistically, that 80% of, 8 out of 10 young Catholics that go to college will leave their faith in their college years. 8 out of 10.
And there's plenty of evidence in this room.
Yeah, that's my story.
But that's what, 8 out of 10 lose in college, but how many come back around to it later in life is what I'd be curious, because I quit going to church during college. That's right.
you know, losing your faith and not practicing may be splitting hairs, but I wouldn't say I lost my faith, but I wasn't a regular at Mass every Sunday.
I think that the interesting thing about that number is the massive door that gets opened up in our lives for deviation.
At that time.
That's, to me, that's the thing. It's not, it doesn't matter, it's like, well, don't worry about it because you're coming back. It's hopefully, Lord willing, but, the challenge is like with my kids, I've got 4 in college right now, and that statistic has kind of led me to really challenge them. Because if you crack open that door, then it really is, come on, Holy Spirit, to bring us back. And we're in a room full of guys, I know, a lot of the stories in this room, and mine, included, is how we've gone and then found and come back, or, all had our walks. But what a massive opportunity that I think, you talk about spiritual warfare. That's not a number that I take lightly, especially with my children. It's like, I hope they come back, but still, why even the opportunity? What's that about? That's what I want.
I think even as strong as my faith is now, even if you stumble a little bit, and I do what I can never miss Mass, but we're traveling or whatever, just missing that 1 week, even if it's valid reasons for all intents and purposes, it still weakens you. So you can get back into church, the following Sunday or whatever. I feel it. I mean, I don't know if anybody else notices. You stumble a little bit, and how much easier is it to keep going down that path versus turning back and getting back in line?
We want it for students, for young people, to bother them when they do miss Mass, so that we want to give them that desire to attend Mass and learn their faith and live their faith. That's what we need to fight.
That's what I end up having to do with my kids is when I get home is explaining everything that went on, because they may sit there and act like they're participating, but I know they aren't. I mean, they're 10 and 11 years old. They're, they're thinking about what they're going to be doing this afternoon. So we have a little talks after
I
lunch.
would love for my son to pretend like he's participating.
Mine usually get whacked in the back of the head if I don't see their lips moving during the words and songs.
I'll just tell them I used to. Nick, run a lap.
Yeah, figure it out.
Take a lap.
Sylvia, did you want to say
No, I was
something?
just gonna say similar experience to Michael. I mean, the only time the boys want to go to Mass is when they visit us. Really, that's sad, but it's true. And we were so happy when they selected A&M because they have a church right there and a very active young priest who will literally drag them to church. That doesn't work. I think it's a rebellion thing. I don't know if that's the answer. Maybe they're just rebelling against their parents. They went to church every Sunday until then they graduated from high school, and it's like, wow. I don't have to do this anymore. I think a lot of it is that. I don't think it's so much that they walk away from their faith. I think it's just that they're rebelling. That's what I conclude, because they still believe. I mean, it's not like they're atheists. I mean, they do believe. I mean, our son.
Yeah, you're hard pressed to find people that are going
Our
to say that
second
they're
son,
atheists or that they're.
Gabriel was coming back from a trip to New Orleans, and they were coming back, and he had a little accident on the highway, and the car flipped, and they almost went into the ditch. And really, they were very lucky. And when he said, you know, I'm really lucky to be alive, he said to me, and I said, yeah, well, somebody kind of protected you, I think. And he kind of looked at me and he said, yeah, I think so, I see what you mean. And this is, you know, Gabriel, who is always,
So cool.
well, he thinks he is.
Well, you know, I had a priest tell me back when I was just about ready to graduate from high school and go on to college, and he said, be careful. He said, you've had a structured life of your parents and everything else, now you're gonna be on your own, you have to make your own decisions. And so when I didn't go right on to college, I did go to college and then, but I went in the Navy and everything else before I went seriously in college. And when I seriously went to college is when I left the church. And it was it's the opening of that door for kids. It's the first time they have to make some of their own decisions. They don't have their parents all getting ready for Mass on Sunday. They just went to a big fraternity party on Saturday night. They still got a hangover, and the last thing in the world they want to do is go to church, you know? So it's not as much, I think some of it's rebellion, but I think a lot of it is also the first time that they gotta make their own decisions. They don't have somebody looking down on them. They don't think they got somebody looking down on them. And that's what the priest told me. He said,
Well,
be
that's
careful.
more like peer pressure. Like you said, they're gonna go out Saturday night, they're gonna, for the first times in their lives, maybe drink more than they should. All of a sudden, Sunday morning comes around, and it's like, I'm not getting out of bed. And if they did, how many of they, you know, they go off to church, how many of their friends are they gonna see at Mass? Not too many, because they're all hungover, sleeping in too. And all of a sudden, it gets like, why am I the only one doing this? And I think peer pressure is a big part of it as well.
Although I will tell you, the A&M Catholic Church, the priest, he goes out of his way to fill the church with a lot of pretty young women. And so all these guys, I mean, if you really want to meet pretty young, you agree, right? If you really want to meet pretty young women at A&M, I mean, if you go to that Mass, I mean, it's like three-quarters of the parish, it seems like they're pretty young women. And I kept telling my sons, you know, when we went to the Mass, I said, why aren't you here on Sunday mornings? I mean, my gosh, look at all these girls.
Sylvia, it's no different. That's the reason David Sullivan goes to church, okay? It's 3/4 of women on a daily mass, okay?
Daily masses, oh, it's filled with women.
Okay, Don.
All right,
Of
so,
course, we all
All right.
use the same cane.
all right, so getting back on track a little bit, what I wanted to do is give you some context of what it means to be the spiritual head or the leader of your family. So I'd like to start off with a couple of definitions of leadership. And the first one comes from John Maxwell. I don't know if any of you have heard of John Maxwell. He wrote a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. He's also a Protestant minister, but he's considered a leadership guru. And his definition of leadership, I think, is spot on. He says that leadership is influence. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's the influence you have on other people. And then he has this law that he calls the law of the lid. And this really struck home with me, and I thought I'd share it with you. The law of the lid essentially says that your ability to influence is limited by the level of your leadership. People are only going to follow you so far. And people aren't talking about your family. So if you're not viewed as the leader, they're going to follow somebody. They're going to follow something. So, who's the best leader of all time? Jesus Christ. And the next best leader are those who followed him, the saints. And for us, our best role model is Saint Joseph, okay, who is the patron of workers, patron of fathers, patron of husbands. So he's the one that we should go to and look to and ask for his intercession and helping with these things. So I thought I'd give you a quick acronym of a way to kind of help you remember what you need to do in order to be a leader. Leads should help you remember. And first thing is that we need to lead from the front. And one of the things I remember Maxwell saying in one of his talks is that if you turn around and no one's following you, you're not a leader. So it doesn't matter if you have the title. What matters is what's happening. Just because you became the father, that doesn't make you the leader of the household. You got to earn it. Because your actions speak louder than your words. And that's especially true with kids. As you know, most of them don't listen to what we're saying anyway. But they do pay attention to what you do. And if your actions are incongruent with what you say, they will pick up on that in a heartbeat. You can't ask anybody to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself. And as I was preparing this talk, it reminded me of a time when I was a brand new second lieutenant in the Army. And I was an engineer officer. And we were doing our 2 weeks, that's when I was in the reserves, at Fort Hood. And if you know anything about Fort Hood, it's got two extremes. When it's not raining, it's nothing but dust. But when it rains, it floods and it can get really muddy. And one of our mission was to build essentially a mobile tank gas station. And there are these big old berms. And one of the things they teach you in engineering school is drainage. Drainage is very, do I have any engineers in here? Okay, so drainage is very important. I don't have an engineering background, okay, so they gave me a cram course in the Army for 6 months. But one thing that they do tell you is that drainage is everything. And so we had this big mission that we had to complete this this mobile facility for the tankers because they were going to be doing a big exercise. And it had been raining. We'd already been there for 10 days, and it had rained like 6 of the days that we were there. And so we were having a hard time getting our equipment to the site because it would sink in the mud. And this particular night, me and some of the other young lieutenants we had already gotten dressed, and we were about to go into town and just kind of have a good time and relax. When I got word that our site was flooding, one of the culverts had been squashed by one of the pieces of equipment, and the site wasn't draining. And we had to get guys back out there. And I remember my XO, the executive officer of the company, I was just going to tell my platoon sergeant to get some guys to go out there and fix it. Because I was already in my civilian clothes. And my XO said, Gonzalez, you need to be out there with me. So I got back in my BDUs and I got in my blazer and went out to the site with the guys. And I actually got out in the mud. We couldn't get any equipment out of this way to do it all with hand. And it's still pouring down rain. So I had mud up to my knees. And we're out there with shovels and everything trying to dig that culvert out. And we finally got everything done. And we were all soaking wet, full of mud and everything. And I didn't get to go out with the guys. But the end result of that is that from that day forward, I could ask those guys to do anything for me. They would follow me through thick and thin. Because I was willing, and I followed the advice of that XO, to get out there, to get muddy, and to get wet, and do what I was asking them to do. That was a very powerful lesson for me as a young lieutenant. And the same thing applies in our daily lives. You know, we can't ask our children and our family members to do that which we're not willing to do as well. So we have to lead from the front. We have to be the example. The second thing is we have to educate ourselves and educate our families. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is incorporate some sort of formal formation. You're doing that. You're here. Okay, and hopefully you're doing things in addition to that on your own time. That you're doing some spiritual reading in your daily life. That you're reading some sort of material. And I'm not suggesting that you pick up the catechism and read it cover to cover, but what I am recommending that you do is that that during the course of the week you have some sort of other good Catholic material that you're reading to learn more about your faith. And notice I said good Catholic material. I don't think you have time to be messing around reading something other than Catholic material. If you don't know your Catholic faith, why are you reading something else? Help yourself grow, and then find opportunities to teach your family. You were saying that after Mass you talk with your kids. That's a perfect thing to be doing. Or even if it's just on the way home after Mass, talking to your wife about what the homily was. What did you get out of it? Okay? To start creating an atmosphere where it's all right to talk about our faith at home. The third thing is our attitude. Okay? You can't come here to Joe Catholic and go to Mass and then go home and be, grumpy or be a monster at home. Again, that goes back to what I said before, is that, if you're being incongruent in your behavior and what you're saying, that's what's going to resonate with people, your family. Dad's a hypocrite. He says one thing, but he does another. It means we also have to have a winning attitude. And by that I mean that, one of the things that's bothering me right now is that, I know there's a lot of bad stuff going on right now with HHS and all this other stuff. And as I said 2 weeks ago, there have always been bad things going on. Okay? So why are we acting like we've lost the fight? Christ has already won the battle. He paid the price for us. It's time we start acting like that. And then the other thing that we've got to do is embrace that in the way that we live our lives for our families. The fourth thing is the D is discipline. Okay, we're willing to do all sorts of things to get in physical shape, or to work those extra hours to get a promotion, or to make the sacrifices to buy a new car and everything, but we're lazy when it comes to our spirituality. You've got to have the discipline to start incorporating that formation that I was talking about. If it means getting up early, do it. Because what is discipline? Discipline is doing things you don't like to do, to be blunt about it. I'm going to be honest with you. Those of you that know me, okay, I'll tell you, I don't like getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get ready to be here at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Okay, but I know I need to do it. And honestly, on most weekends during the school year, I work on Saturdays till about midnight. I don't like getting up on Sunday morning to go to church, but I know I got to do it because I need it. I don't like driving out to Keller once a month and being gone from Stacy for a whole weekend. But I know I'm doing that to help my formation there with the Ave Maria classes. So we got to have the discipline to do what we need to do in order to grow in our faith, whether we like it or not. And then finally, the one thing about being a leader as a Christian, it means being a servant and making sacrifice. The first thing is that if you'll open your Bibles to the 5th chapter of Ephesians, verse 20, starting at verse 23. All right, has everybody found it?
What part of the Bible?
Page 298.
Yeah.
The New or the Old?
The New Testament.
New Testament.
All right, somebody who's found it, will somebody read it for me, please? I would like you to read verses 23 and 24. Somebody volunteer? Court?
For the husband is head of his wife, just as Christ is head of the church. He himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything.
Okay. Can you read the line right before it too, verse 22?
Wives should be subordinate to their husbands as to the Lord.
Okay, that's the line that all the guys remember and tell their wives, right? Okay, but the line that we forget is verse 25. Will somebody read that for me, please? Tanner?
Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her. Go on.
Yeah.
To sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle, or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish.
Thank you. We got to remember both parts of that. It means, first off, we're not ogres at home. We're not tyrants. You know, we don't go home after today and tell our wives, well, you know, Don said, according to Scripture, my way or the highway. I'm the leader of the family. It doesn't work that way. Okay? The church recognizes that there's equal dignity between men and women. Okay? And whatever's working for you, keep on doing whatever's working. But the point I'm making is that you're the one that's responsible for the spiritual growth of your family. And that also means, and this is very important, especially if you have sons, the way you treat your wife is the way your sons will treat women.
If I can tack on to that, I understand also that if your daughters, if how you treat your family, your daughters will look for a man in accordance with that. So if you're not the greatest father in that respect, that's the kind of direction she may be looking at too. So she's looking at you for an example for a husband as well.
And I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, if you've been married for any length of time, you know you're gonna have arguments. Okay, and if you're one of those marriages that never had an argument, God bless you. Okay, but I know that Stacy and
I've never won an argument.
well, I finally won one the other day. It's my first one in 15 plus years. But there's a way to argue with your spouse, and probably and most importantly, that should be done privately. Your children should see you treat your wife like a queen, because she is the queen of your house. You should treat her that way, with respect and love. And sometimes that means doing the stuff that you don't like to do. You know, those are opportunities. You know, I'm not gonna lie to you, there are certain things that we can all go around and share the little bitty nuances of our marriage, of the things that our wives do that irritate us. Those are opportunities for sanctification, to lift those up. You know? Just like we irritate them when we don't put the seat down, there are things that they do that irritate us as well. And rather than snipping at each other about it, even those little bitty times like that are opportunities for sacrifice and service that we should offer.
Real quick on something he said, in 20 years of law enforcement, 12 of that was from patrol, where I dealt with kids on a regular basis that were doing something wrong, and that's the only time we get to interact with them as a police officer. All the young girls, I mean, 12 to 16-year-old girls that I dealt with that were doing something wrong, smoking in the woods, running away at night, whatever it was, every one of them had a very common theme in their life, and that was an absent father. And I don't mean necessarily a father divorced out of the household. I'm talking about a non-participant father that the mom would come pick him up at 2 in the morning at the station. The dad wasn't there, even though he may be living in the house. They didn't eat dinner together. The little things every day in life that we do as fathers as well, I think impact our children greatly. The girls that I knew in college that never did anything wrong in the sense that they didn't sleep around, they didn't get drunk every Saturday night. Same thing, common theme, very present father in their life. And I think those girls will go on to marry a strong man that is good for them, is what I see, because the other ones are gonna end up drifting off with the guys who treat them like, like their dad treated them, absent. You're just here for me when I need you. And I think that's important. And that's something that I found over and over and over again over the last 20 years of my life as law enforcement officer.
And I'll say this finally, because I know some of you don't have children, or some of you have your children grown. You still may be a father figure to nephews and nieces. I know some of you are. And in your workplace, those of you that are teachers, I can't tell. It blows me away the number of times that I have graduating seniors tell me that I've been like a father to them. Some of these kids didn't have fathers. And you just never know when you're gonna have an opportunity to affect lives that way. So, being a spiritual leader is not just about being a spiritual leader at home, it's about being a leader wherever you are, that people see. It's like what we talked about 2 weeks ago. When people see you, do they see a difference, or do you just blend in with the crowd? You need to make a difference. You need to stand out in the crowd in a positive way so that you can be prepared to get your family to heaven.
I have 10 minutes. I'm talking about Maximilian Kolbe, and I think most of us are familiar with the story, so I won't belabor that. But just to give you a frame of reference, he was born in 1894 and died in 1941. That made him 47 years on this earth. And just to tell the story very briefly, he was a Polish Franciscan priest. He had been helping transport Jews, protect them. He'd also been a writer. Nazis captured him once, let him go, brought him back to Auschwitz. How many of you guys know what number Michael Young is?
10,
Josh Hamilton?
32.
If I asked you who that was before this session, you probably wouldn't know who that was. That's Maximilian Kolbe's number in Auschwitz. The story was this. 3 guys ran away from Auschwitz, made the guy mad who ran the place. And guess what the guy's name was? The Butcher. He was mad, so he said, okay, find me 10 guys, line them up, put them in a bunker, we're gonna starve them to death and prove a point. So one of the 10 guys goes, dang, my wife and my children. He realizes this is not gonna have a happy ending. Well, Maximilian Kolbe, a priest, a couple rows back, he goes, I'll volunteer, I'll take his place. They switch places. The other guy survives. So Kolbe's in this bunker, for a better means, starving to death. He's praying every day, he's trying to say Mass, he's singing hymns to Mary, and slowly but surely, the other 9 guys start passing away. 2 weeks later, the Nazis had enough. They're not going to put up with this. They want a new batch to bring in. They inject carbonic acid in his arm. He puts his arm out, and he dies of martyrdom. Okay. It's a horrific story. It's a courageous story. And chances are, none of us in this room are going to be faced with this. But we are going to be faced with adversity. And are we prepared for it? And if you guys have ever heard me talk in RCA, I actually tell that story. This is a lifelong journey being a Catholic, and you're going to have strength, and you may not know when you're going to need that strength. You're going to face adversity. So here I am, 18 months ago, I'm telling that story to some woman. 2 months later, her husband gets pancreatic cancer. On Monday, last Monday, this Monday, he passed away. He wasn't 47 years old. He was 44 years old. God willing, she has the strength to see this through. She has an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old kids. The funeral is here this week. Sandy went to the woman. She says, what do you need? She goes, I need time with women. She goes to the son's mother. What do you need? She needs to be with other women. I'll take care of the kids. She needs to have some time to herself. So that's that question. I'm not going to ask you to sacrifice your life and get in the bunker. But when adversity happens to you or to someone else, are you ready? That's a lesson we learned from Maximilian Kolbe. Second lesson. Went to Mass a couple weeks ago, and we had prayers of the faithful. And usually we're praying for the church, and we're praying for the priest, and we're praying for sick people, we're praying for those people that passed away and go to heaven. And the prayer this time was, we're praying for religious freedom in the United States. And I'm going, gee, I never thought I'd ever hear that prayer be made. It just took that for granted, that there was religious freedom in the United States. That was the whole purpose of the country 200 plus years ago. So I'm almost bewildered by the thought. Okay, now I know Don is everything Catholic, all Catholic, nothing but Catholic.
All Catholic, all the time.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure a few years ago to hear Truett Cathy speak at a prayer breakfast, which I go to annually. It's a Dallas leadership prayer breakfast over at the Anatole. And it's 2,500 of your closest friends having breakfast listening to a speaker. It was actually started by Tom Landry and a couple of the guys. And Mrs. Landry usually comes. Well, Truett Cathy at this time was probably 80 plus years old. And you could tell he was not 100%. But he was still very entertaining. Well, Truett Cathy's son's been in the news lately, right? This is the now president of Chick-fil-A. Truett Cathy is the founder of Chick-fil-A. They're not open on Sundays. For what reason? They want their families, they want their employees to go to worship. And Truett Cathy is not Catholic, he's Protestant. And if you're a mall operator and one of your stores is not open on a Sunday, the mall operator is not very happy. So Truett Cathy has fought adversity through his life. So Wednesday, now I do belong to a company that's owned and managed by Catholics, okay? And that's not a secret in our organization, even though it's 1,700 people in our organization. There were a lot of people who ate chicken on Wednesday. Because if you go to Chick-fil-A, you got three choices. Chicken and chicken and chicken. Okay, that's all they serve. There's no hamburgers there. You can't get a ham sandwich, you get chicken. There were a lot of people in line. Now I know we're in the Bible Belt, so this is the exception. But at lunch, it was like 30-minute wait, and it was hot. So I went to lunch, a bunch of guys went. Then for dinner, I said, okay, I'm gonna stop by on the way home and take food home. Because Sandy and I never eat out. We eat at home 90% of the time. So I went to the Chick-fil-A on Old Denton Road, and it was 2/3 of their air conditioning was out, inside. It was taxed. And it was almost hotter inside than it was outside. The people were lined up again. Not 30 minutes, maybe 15 to 20-minute wait. But what was really interesting was a young couple comes in, and they can't figure out why all these people are in line. So they ask a customer, not someone working for the firm, but they ask a customer what was it. They talked about it a little bit, and they said, well, heck with this, we walked out. About 2 minutes later, they came back in. They must have thought about it, that this probably is a pretty fair topic to talk about. So on the following Friday, we drove by, and there was no lines, and we just kept going, because Friday was supposed to be the protest. So this whole concept of freedom of speech and the right to have a biblical marriage are at risk in our community. And I think, obviously, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there was overwhelming support. Someone made a comment, dear to Charles's heart, if only that many people would vote. Okay. So I want to just tie this up with one other topic. Watch the Olympics the last 2 weeks. Watch the Parade of Nations the first night out. I don't know the statistics, but I will guarantee you that if you went back to 1941, when the Colby incident happened, that 65% of those countries did not exist at that time. Okay? I mean, I should have had a globe just try to figure where all these countries come from. But, just think of the things that have changed. When we all grew up watching black and white TV, watching United States versus Russia in track and field on Saturday afternoon on Wild World Sports. Some of you guys are old enough to remember this. This was actually important stuff. It was really important stuff. Those are the same days that how many baseball games were on TV a week? One. Okay. Younger people have just been deluged with all this stuff on satellite or cable TV. But we're thinking about, at those times, it was very easy for us to figure out what's going on. East Germany, West Germany, Russia, China, United States. We would have never thought of having issues of religious freedom in the United States at that time. We were concerned with, if you grew up in Cuba or other places, that's where all the bad guys were. That's where people were getting killed.
Well, there's one of them.
Or one of the places. So Uncle
Last
Leo,
good guy got out.
Uncle Leo was not a
We
bad
didn't
guy.
want very bad.
But this whole idea of the enemy was there. The enemy was never here. So think about that as the Olympics end on Sunday. And what we can do internally. So are you prepared, in case you're challenged or called, like Maximilian Kolbe was, to step up and answer the call? And then two, can we celebrate our freedom here? And if you have the right to religious freedom of speech and you don't speak, then what is that right? And that speech can be either physical actions or talking to someone. Okay, I know you guys gotta get ready to go to mass. So let's go ahead.
Before we say a prayer, can I just say something? Great talks today. There's a movement that we're gonna hear lots more of, and